from Markman Consultancy, and we have started a program along with Being Production and Raindrops Publishers called One on One. We will be talking about CSR, corporate social responsibility, and sustainable development, and the way forward for the corporate NGOs and the social section of the society in India and outside India. So today we have a wonderful personality and individual, a doyen and intellectual, Professor Sudhir K. Sinha, in front of us, who will be sharing his opinion and guiding us on CSR. Professor Sinha is working with IRMA in Anand. He is a disciple of Mahatma Gandhi ji, and he has been engaged in promoting and advancing the agenda of transformational CSR against the transaction philanthropy. He presented a social theory of underlying impacts, a critical indicator for determining CSR and development projects. He is a lead fellow and is a CSR specialist and practitioner. He is leading the Center of Excellence and Responsible Business Management and Corporate Philanthropy at IRMA. He is the founder and director at the Center of Sustainability and Responsibility Inc., CSR Inc. And he is also a founder member of the Human Rights and Business Resource Group, HRBRG. Overall, he has an experience of 35 years. He headed and managed the CSR and sustainability functions of leading Indian and MNC brands such as Tata Steel, Cipla, Reliance, and Moza Beer and ArcelorMittal. He was associated with PwC as advisor CSR. So there are a lot of, there is a long list of his introduction. I would request Professor Sinha to come online and please take us through your journey within the domain of CSR, because as I was going through your profile, I saw that you have been associated with it since 1984. And let me tell you, sir, I was born in 83. So I was just 1 year when you entered in this particular domain. So I would like to know about your journey and how it began and what are the changes you have seen. So welcome, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, you have made me old, so this is a privilege for me to speak to young professional like you are, young leader, rather, I would say that. So thank you once again for reaching out to me and giving me this opportunity to get into an interaction with you on CSR. As you know that I have been, as you said, that I've been in this space for the last 45 years. So I have gone through the ups and downs, many of the upheavals, you can say, in terms of understanding, practicing, implementation, everything. And good part is that in last 35 years, I earned some good experiences based on which I try to develop my own understanding of corporate social responsibility, which is in conflict with the present understanding of corporate social responsibility in India, which I'll discuss it later. But as you asked about my journey, definitely I would like to speak in very brief about my journey. I started my career in 1984 just after passing out from XISS. I completed my post-graduation diploma in rural development. And as a young professional, then CSR was not a terminology very common in India. 84, 85, CSR was not the terminology. Corporates, whatever they were doing,
right,
community development. So with that understanding, I joined, and there is a small story behind it. During the interview, in Tata Steel, I was asked, rather everyone attended that interview was asked. The common question to everyone was that, why should a company get into community development? not social responsibility when the social responsibility term was not there.
Mm-hmm.
I gave my argument that why companies should get into community development, because companies make different kind of impacts on society. With my limited understanding then, I simply said that, take an example of Tata Steel, which came to this area around then 70 years before. So there was a society already existing in this area, Jamshedpur and around, even the mines and collieries of Tata Steel. So that was a uniform, more or less society, which after Tata Steel came, definitely there was some, disparities in terms of those who got opportunity to work for the company. So they got maximum is the income which were better than what others were getting. So immediately after a company comes to a society or a community, the first impact makes is create, say, economic disparities. So those who get some opportunity to work for the company, definitely they become economically better off than rest of their colleagues. So this is one major responsibility of a company, to see that this gap is minimized, this kind of disparities. And this was my answer. And that's how in fact I got.
Mm-hmm.
I still believe in this theory of corporate social responsibility. The corporate corporate social responsibility is equated with corporate philanthropy, and that philanthropy, which is very transactional. It has not got any linkages in the sense that, okay, if I'm making a kind of impact, so what are my philanthropic activities which are helping those impacts get mitigated? So this is not happening. So that is where, so I just draw a line that CSR, which is philanthropy, the understanding of CSR, which is philanthropy, is not really meeting out the objectives of real corporate social responsibility. Over to you.
Mm-hmm. Right, sir. That is an important information and important sharing about your interview and the questions which you mentioned. So, as a philanthropy in 1984, it was basically a philanthropy, or of course, CSR was not prominent, or sustainability development was not prominent at that point of time. Since then, you have moved on and you have come to a journey of starting something like CSR Satyagrah, right? So where exactly this thought process came from? Because I'm moving directly from 1984 to 2018 and 17, right? Skipping a lot of things in between, but I would definitely request you to take us to that particular journey, because in between you have also contributed for PwC as an advisor, and then you were part of Cipla, ArcelorMittal, and Reliance, and different organizations. So what transition which that you saw after 2003, because you were in Tata till 2003. So after that, how things changed, and what were the things which you saw?
You see, in fact, my journey of CSR Satyagraha began way back in 1984 only, right? When I joined Tata Steel. But I named or say launched it formally in 2017. Now, why I say that, and also CSR Satyagraha actually was germinated in 1984, because my exposure, in a way, I was very fortunate that I got the opportunity to work for Tata Steel, where value system of a company I could learn about. And I was given an independent hand to work for the community. So that definitely helped me understand as to what actually was was going on and what right was happening. Everything, in fact, I could understood in my journey of say around 30 to 35 years. Let me just take let me just take you back. So, so when I started working for Tata Steel, I realized that this is a company which empowers you as a professional, right? They gave me a complete freedom, okay, to go whatever you do. But I would say that freedom was controlled freedom. It's not that kind of a complete freedom as you work in an NGO sector. So it was a controlled freedom, but that also helped me get empowered, right? It made me more independent and innovative in my approach to planning and implementing CSR now. So this particular thing is rare. Are you there? Hello?
Yes, yes, I'm there. I'm there. Yes,
So,
sir, I'm there. I'm there.
yeah. So this is very rare. Not many companies do it. When I see around, then when I have to compare this with my colleagues like you, young colleagues, CSR professionals, then I find them working as, I'm just turning this or coining this term here, caged parrots, right? So today you'll find CSR practitioners or CSR professionals working like caged parrots. They are talented. They are very talented professionals. Yet they are, and they have huge potential to bring transformation in society. But what they do, they speak and do what their companies want them to speak and do. I'm really very sorry to use this term, cage parrot, for them, which I know that, so I'm sure that many will not like it, will object to it or react to it. But the fact of the matter is that this is true. They cannot deny it. So this is one. So that is why, if at all we want to see change, qualitative change happening in the space of CSR, then I hold CSR professionals a very important and key, uh, uh, stakeholder. I would say that. So this is where, so I was a little, and this is where I'm very much disappointed that it is not happening. Even the look at CSR heads or CSR leaders. They are holding good position in companies, but do they have authority to do things on their own? Answer is no. Their positions are very ceremonial in terms of that, and it gives them different kind of status outside the company, not inside company.
Right.
This is why, so I am making my observations about CSR professionals, and CSR professionals are key stakeholders to CSR, and this is where I'm challenging them that they have to do something. They have to make CSR very dynamic, and they have to drive it. Not that, so others are going to drive it, because they are professionals. They know the subject. They are subject matter experts, and this is where, so I find my discomfort. So now moving on to other stakeholders. So CSR Satyagraha, when I talk, so I'm talking about different stakeholders of CSR Satyagraha. So take government as key stakeholder. Again, government has given the act. The act, CSR section 135 of the Companies Act, which was enacted in 2014. Now, they have made it mandatory. They have made CSR mandatory and asked companies to allocate 2%. I don't know why this 2%. Where has the concept of this 2% come from? Why not more or less? So what was the rationale behind fixing it at 2%? There is no answer to it. And I'm telling you, I can definitely give you enough arguments as to why I'm saying that the concept of 2% is completely bogus. It doesn't work that way. But anyway, coming back to the government, it has given the act, but it has not given the definition of CSR. I have raised this question time and again that give one single definition which gives the uniform understanding of CSR in our country. Even if you want to define CSR as philanthropy, so say it so that CSR is philanthropy and it is a philanthropic responses of companies towards society. So you are not saying that. Now, then there are various other things and very recent one. You know, I was going through their amendments. You know, now.
Yes, sir.
It is very funny. It is very ridiculous. One of the recommendations which they have made, the government has made, which is going to eliminate the role of NGOs. This is reasonable. At least, you know, so I give my reaction to the government, and if it reaches to you, to the government, definitely I want to pass on my, you know, strong resistance to this particular amendment. NGOs, how can you eliminate NGOs, their role? They are very much partner of social responsibility and corporate social responsibility for companies. Companies are not into the business of CSR. So suddenly they have to depend on institutions like NGOs. So this is about this. Now take NGOs. Now when I'm talking about NGOs, now I find that in CSR, there is over domination of big size NGOs. You'll agree with me now that it is the small size NGOs or grassroots NGOs who are making positive impacts in our society. But since they are not presented as small, they cannot speak good English. That is why they are kept out of the purview of making partners. So what I'm trying to say that critical about large size NGO, I'm not against them, but definitely companies should give opportunities to small NGOs, especially where they are working, and they should have a formal partnership with small NGOs. And that is what actually going to make a huge change. And that will make companies move from transactional CSR to transformational, mark my word. Now, another stakeholder which I'm going to talk about is your consultants. So suddenly after this act came into force, companies started looking for some kind of consultancy. Now you have too many 3 to 5 star consultants without having any ground experience. Let me tell you, I'm very much critical about that. I don't want to name them. Don't wish to name them here. You understand who I am referring to. All big consultants. And they are the ones, who have, one so I know that he was making a claim that it is his organization having say 10% of share, of consultancies, CSR consultancies. Right. This is really very dangerous. So one organization will have say a share of 10% of entire CSR fund. So what I'm saying that so they are working out of their 5-star offices. They don't have any clue as to what happens or what goes with the communities. Then I move on to media. I equally hold media also responsible. Media is not going beyond the boundaries of cities. They are writing only one media house, especially in print media. I appreciate me. I'm making a reference over here for continuous, Mint is writing
Effort.
continuous. Yeah, so they are making continuous effort. The only thing which I would expect from Mint and other print media houses that they should go beyond the boundaries of cities. Especially, you'll agree with me that large size companies, large size corporates, they are mostly operating out of communities or rural areas or semi-urban areas, and
Right.
this is where
Right.
we are working out there, right? And you have committees out there, you have other stakeholders out there, and you are not interviewing them, you are not actually taking their viewpoints as to what they feel about the CSR being carried out by this big corporate. So that's
Right.
how, and then their report is focused on what they are simply writing about how many companies could spend 100% or 50% or not, and in which area. So areas of education, health, livelihood, and so on and so forth. That's it. They are not really getting deep into it as to how these kind of things really making transformational changes in our society.
Right.
Then lastly, I would also blame, because I now belong to academic sector, so academia. So academia
Right.
also, they are not they have not contributed much to this particular space. Um, you hardly find researchers, right? I think so. For academia, this is an opportunity, a scope that they can carry out different. Uh, so now so these are my concerns, and these are the
Right.
things actually feel very disturbed. And this is the genesis of the movement like CSR Satyagraha. CSR Satyagraha, when I tried out. So you see, uh, I'll just take another 2 minutes to speak more about CSR Satyagraha. So when I was working for CIPLA, I left CIPLA only because so I was finding it that CSR is going out of the track, and that is why I that so I must get out of this job and do something for CSR. And that's how in fact I left the job behind. Although in fact I'm PwC as advisor, not as a permanent full-time employee. Right. But I created my organization called CSR AIM, Center for Sustainability and Responsibility AIM, which you read out that our objective is to promote transformational CSR, which is against national philanthropy. Right.
Correct. Correct.
And so I found out many things, but I did not find any solutions until I visited the Sevagram in Wardha in 2007. Right. So you see, that was very accidental. Let me be very honest when I am saying this. So I went, that was by design. In fact, I went to Sevagram because I follow Gandhi and I wanted to go for a week and then I stayed there. But when I was looking for the solutions as to how I can bring change in the CSR sector, then I got accidentally an idea that why should not I use Satyagraha as a tool which Bapu actually used successfully.
Right.
And that was the genesis of CSR Satyagraha. So that is where also in July 2017 I conceived this idea of CSR Satyagraha, and then I started working on. Formally, I launched it on the 2nd October 2017.
Yeah.
So quickly, what is CSR Satyagraha? So Satyagraha is a reform agenda, right? My agenda is reform, limited to reform, and that will consistently work to preserve and protect the spirit of CSR. Letter of CSR, everyone is actually following. A letter of the CSR Act, but the spirit behind the CSR Act, nobody is actually looking into. So here, in fact, we are going to preserve and protect the core spirit of CSR, which is grossly compromised by assessment. So the spirit of CSR is to help the poor, underprivileged, and vulnerable, and the weaker section of society, and to remove the inequality, and also the social injustice happening, due to the economic growth over here. The second is that it is a peaceful and non-violent war against four things: is glamorization, glorification, commercialization, and marketization of CSR. So I say the thing first is the commercialization of CSR, because companies have taken CSR also as commercial thing, and they are promoting their products and all. Marketization happening to those initiatives, and they are glamorizing is very insensitively issues like hunger, poverty. They are glamorizing that. I mean, so you don't have to, in a country like India, so we are a poor country, everyone knows about it. But this is highly insensitive when you glamorize it. And then lastly is the glorification. So whenever you get the opportunity in Navkis, they invite corporate to speak about CSR. So they only do what? So they sing the Chalisa. Like Hanuman Chalisa, they sing the song. So this is, so finally the CSR is a Ghanaian way to bring transformation and to enable change in approaches to CSR for achieving lasting impact. Satyagraha for CSR will be seeking to holding steadfastly to the core principles of CSR, doing right and doing it right each time and every time. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It was really a wonderful and deep thoughts about CSR. Right. There are many things which I would like to ask about. However, we are running short of time now. I would like to continue this as a series, because I would like to understand that what are the steps you are taking under CSR Satyagraha, and how we are moving forward, and what is the importance of measuring the impact of every activity which is done under CSR, right? Because grassroots level NGOs are important, and they are bringing changes. At the same time, from my understanding, which is not as big as yours, but what I've understood in the last 10 years or 15 years of my service in the industry, that some kind of impact assessment and organized effort has to be done to make these NGOs become prominent in their work, and having a standardized approach towards measuring the impact of the work which we are doing, because beneficiaries and the stakeholders needs attention, and their journey becomes more important, right, than the journey of the other stakeholders, like one who's giving the money or one who's implementing. These are the secondary stakeholders. The primary stakeholder is the beneficiary, or the person who is at the receiving end, and not in terms of money, but in terms of the service what we are providing. We are not giving them any kind of privilege. We are providing them the service. So how that service is impacting their life, that is something which needs to be measured, right? So I would like a small tip or point of view from your side on this.
Okay. On the measurement of CSR, let me very briefly tell you that there is a confusion. People don't understand how to really measure the performance of CSR. There are three terms when we are using the term like the measurement of CSR performance. So there are three terms. One is the output, another is outcome, and third is impact. But unfortunately, in our country, interchangeably, we use for each other, which is not. Now we are very young. If at all, I have to say that post 2014, many companies got into implementation of CSR. They might have taken, plenty of activities, if I have to say so. Those activities must not have, matured enough to create impact. So companies have to understand that within 1 year or 2 years time of your activity, accomplishment of activities, you are not going to create impacts per se. But what you are going to do that, definitely activities achieve outputs and mostly the outcome. So that project is based on outcomes. When you take output, so outputs have to be measured, right? So it's a very mathematical or arithmetical way to measure it. But where it comes to outcomes, then it requires different approaches and different tools to measure it. But when it comes to impact, so maybe 5 years later, so suppose I just take an example that so education, mostly of our companies are working in the area of education. For their benefit, let me tell you that so construction of a school building is one activity which companies are taking up. Now, it has to be again evaluated from the perspective how construction of the building has helped in enrollment of improved or enlarged enrollment of students, right?
Correct.
So the again, the second is that how the construction of that school building has helped in reducing the dropout rate, right? How it has helped teachers to improve their quality of teaching. So these are the outcomes of one particular program under education. Now, so someone who passes out, or maybe say a student who pass out their 10th, so impact now has to be measured after 2, 3, 4, 5 years. How the education of those students have really helped in bringing some changes in society, the qualitative change in society. So it could be, so since students got exposed to some knowledge about hygiene, health, and also it makes them productive, educationally. So they got immediate job after passing out sexual. So these are the impacts of the education. It will happen. So now this is something, so there is a business of impact evaluation or assessment happening. But let me again tell you that not many people are expert in measuring the performance. And here so I would like to bring another. So do I have 1 more minute time to speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So here one is that so quantitative assessment of your performance, and then another is a qualitative assessment. So you have certain indicators for measuring the quantitative performance of CSR, right? But the most important, the key and critical thing is that satisfaction, happiness. So I think so we are not working on this. So happiness and satisfaction is more linked to the impact, right? So if a program or intervention happens in a particular society or community, so after 4 to 5 years, whether those interventions made people feel happy or live happily or not. So, so that is where so we have to draw a line again that the evaluation or assessment of impact definitely should be more qualitative from the perspective of happiness and satisfaction, not the indicators, quantitative indicators that okay, these many people or these many numbers of people got immunized or assisted by health and all. So this is my understanding is that it is going to evolve. Now I think it is evolving, and now some good news is that some companies have made cognizance of the differences between impact assessment and evaluation of
the project.
Right? Yeah. So they are now understanding it, and going forward, definitely there will be a qualitative change in understanding.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And I want more discussions on the impact and the assessment. I will come back to you on the same thing. I am sure that we need to have more discussions. But I thank you for giving this time. And I'm really, really, you know, pleased with your presence and with your knowledge. Thank you.